The ultimate in radical technology, TurboGrafx-CD.
サウンドがスパークする 540MB のすごいやつが
Way cool Beach Boy tunes accompany this CD hit.
TurboGrafx-16 and TurboGrafx-CD for live video games and 2,000 times more memory.
CD-ROM マシンとしてハイコストパフォーマンスを実現。はい
With the Turbo Duo, you can play standard turbo chip and 1 megabit CDs, as well as 2 megabit games. At $299.99, Turbo Duo is the ultimate machine.
The compact disc, abbreviated to the more commonly used CD, has been nothing short of a marvel in not only the tech industry, but most people's lives in its day-to-day use. Developed in partnership by Sony and Philips in 1982, its original use was to store music. However, not long after, the CD-ROM format was created by Denon, which instead allowed data to be stored and was released as a commercial product in 1984. When you think of early gaming consoles that utilize CDs, most people would likely think of the original Sony PlayStation or the Sega Saturn in 1994. Those who are a bit more cluey about older consoles will be quick to mention that something like the 3D interactive multiplayer trumps those by a year or two, but actually, what year did a console first use CDs? 1993? Nope. 1991? Nope again. The answer is 1988. Created as an add-on for the TurboGrafx-16 in the West and the PC Engine in Japan, both of which were manufactured in partnership by NEC and Hudson Soft, the CD-ROM2 or the TurboGrafx-CD depending on where you are, was the pioneering piece of hardware for console gaming to first use CDs. Released only 4 years after the CD-ROM and 6 after the compact disc, so for this reason, it's a wonder of the retro gaming world. It was an add-on though, so before we delve into its original form and its many offspring thereafter, let's take a minute to reflect on the original T16 and PC Engine. Released in 1987 in Japan and 1989 in America, the original console performed admirably in Japan, but ultimately struggled in the West, allegedly due to poor marketing since only NEC were involved in that region. Before the CD add-on, Hue cards were the game's storage medium of choice. A credit card-shaped cartridge thing, the capacity ranged from 2 to 20 megabits. Good for some games, but it's not surprising that NEC and Hudson Soft soon decided to introduce CD technology on December 4th, 1988, only a year later in its native release territory of Japan. This came in the form of the CD-ROM2 system, the first ever gaming console to use CDs. This was actually 2 separate devices, the CD player, plus an interfacing unit that allowed a common power supply to be used. The use of CDs introduced many positives. While they were region-free, which was nice since the Hue cards weren't, they largely increased storage capacity, allowing for cutscenes and much better audio. We were still a while away from fully textured 3D environments, but it was a stepping stone towards that direction. All in all, 120 CD-ROM2 titles were released. While it was a roaring success in Japan, the US was a different story. Selling as a TurboGrafx-CD instead, it cost an astronomical $399 in the August of 1990. What's more, it didn't even come bundled with the original T16 or any games. On top of that, only a paltry 4 titles were released in a 6-month time span. It did have cool features like AV out, since the original console only supported RF, plus the extra ADPCM audio chip, but since the scarce amount of games out there like Fighting Street and Monster Lair arguably didn't make use of the superior audio and storage anyway, $400 would have been a hard sell for an add-on, and was another example of the poor marketing in the US. This was far from the end of the story though, as in the October of 1991, the Super CD-ROM2 format was introduced. This new format increased the buffer RAM from 64 kilobits to 256, meaning more data could be cached from the disk, as well as updating the system BIOS to version 3. Another 255 games would be released using the Super CD-ROM2 Monkia. While there was a dedicated hardware release that was designed to be connected directly into the Super Graphics, most would have experienced Super CD-ROM2 on the first gen hardware through a Hue card called the Super System card. A card was always needed to play discs, but this updated card meant extended functionality for early adopters as well. Although sadly, this version of the card was only available by mail order in America, another thorn in the side as far as their distribution and marketing were concerned.
Power up with TurboGrafx-CD games so real, they're unreal. You've waited long enough. Harness the power of TurboGrafx-16 system for yourself and power up.
Things were to get better though. On September 21st, 1991, Japan released the PC Engine Duo. This combined the original PC Engine and CD-ROM2 hardware into one unit and didn't require a system card, becoming a must-have for gamers interested in the system. It retailed for just shy of 60,000 yen and even won a Good Design Award. America followed suit on the 10th of October in 1992 and named their variant the Turbo Duo. NEC were determined to do things differently marketing-wise this time around. Instead of using their local internal marketing department, NEC Home Electronics USA handed the responsibility to a company called Turbo Technologies Incorporated. Even though TTI were actually made up of NEC and Hudson Soft employees anyway, they still made some great decisions. For one, they marketed the Turbo Duo for $299, which was considered a great price for the time. Not only was it a combined unit, but for that price, it also included a bunch of bundled games. Not only was there Ninja Spirit and YS1 and 2, but also the Super CD compilation that included Gates of Thunder, Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Revenge, and even Bomberman if you input a code. Furthermore, TTI reduced the price of the T16 to $150 and the Super System card to $65, favouring legacy users. Ultimately though, the Turbo Duo is where the story of the T16 in America ends. Even though TTI did good things for the system, marketing campaigns involving Johnny Turbo or otherwise, the system was still somewhat obscure and never came close to even the Sega CD. Support was ultimately ended in 1995. Still had legs in Japan of course, where it had always been popular. March 1993 saw a variant called the PC Engine Duo R, released for 39,800 yen, followed by the RX in the June of 1994. Both models were more or less the same internally as the standard Duo, although they had the headphone jack and locking cue card door removed. Additionally, the RX had a 6-button controller, opposed to the standard 2-button versions found earlier. So, what was next? By the mid-90s, the CD-ROM2 was reaching the end of its commercial life. However, there was one last hurrah in the form of the arcade CD-ROM2. Released in the March of 1994 and only in Japan, 11 more titles were released. It never had its own dedicated hardware, but instead there were 2 more system cards. The arcade card Duo was designed for hardware that had the Super CD-ROM2 built in, like the PC Engine Duo, while the arcade card Pro was for everything else before. Bumped the cache RAM up to a huge 18 megabits, which meant that a number of great Neo Geo fighting games could then be ported across. There's also the Laseractive by Pioneer in 1993. While obviously not being manufactured by NEC or Hudson Soft, this weird conglomerate of a thing namely used laser discs for media. However, there was an expansion port for add-ons, one of which was by NEC, that allowed the Laseractive to play all PC Engine games, cue-card or CD. But I think the Laseractive is worthy of its own Wonders of the Retro Gaming World episode for another day, so let's leave it at that. Ultimately, this was the biggest foray into console gaming that NEC would ever have. There was the PCFX in 1994, however, that was only released in Japan and didn't have a graphics chip that supported polygons. This made it quite uncompetitive compared to the likes of the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn released at the same time, which meant that it was soon forgotten to the gaming sands of time. It wasn't the complete end of the company in gaming though, as it eventually manufactured chips for other console manufacturers. For example, the NEC VR4300 chip was used as the CPU on the Nintendo 64, while it also manufactured an LSI chip for the graphics system and the Xbox 360. Hudson Soft, on the other hand, was always releasing games on other systems, so it wasn't completely reliant on the PC Engine. History of the company is likely detailed enough for its own video as well, but the abridged version is that after being around for nearly 40 years, it was eventually merged with Konami Digital Entertainment in 2012. These days, there is quite a busy little homebrew scene for the PC Engine and T16, and as you can imagine, most of these are released on the CD format for the ease of it and the extended capabilities. Sole exception to this rule is Nanteta T Engine, which I've no doubt said wrongly, but is a homebrew game actually released on HuCard to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the PC Engine being released. Other notable homebrew releases that are actually on CD include games like Meteor Blast DX by Mindrak and Mysterious Song by Frozen Utopia. Otherwise, if you don't own the real hardware, then there is of course emulation, although you didn't hear that from me. All in all, the CD-ROM2 left a legacy that has continued up to this very day. Many consoles use CD-ROMs from the late 90s and onwards, eventually progressing into DVD-ROMs, which have now themselves progressed into Blu-rays. It's only now, 30 years later, that the use of CDs is starting to decline thanks to a large amount of storage space afforded to modern consoles and high-speed internet connections. CDs might be starting to go the way of the dodo thanks to digital downloads, but it's amazing nonetheless how many decades they've been relevant for on consoles. And that, my friends, all started with the CD-ROM2. Hey there retro gamers, and thanks for watching. All sources for the information in this video can be found in the description box. Also, if you have any suggestions for future videos in the series, then please leave a comment down below.